Deadwood might look like the gritty, mud-soaked heart of the American frontier, but behind HBO's acclaimed Western lies a truth far stranger, and often far darker, than anything the writers dared to show on screen. From real-life figures twisted into villains or heroes to events that never actually happened, the series takes more liberties with history than most viewers realize. And once you learn the facts, you'll never watch Deadwood the same way again. So saddle up, history lovers, because we're about to dig into the most horrible facts the show got wrong about the real Deadwood.
Al Swearingen. In the show, actor Ian McShane brings to life one of television's most complex and unforgettable Western figures, Al Swearingen, the cunning proprietor of the infamous Gem Saloon. McShane portrays him as a calculating and persuasive businessman, someone who thrives on control and influence while navigating the lawless and uncertain environment of frontier Deadwood. Beneath his polished charm lies a sharp mind that constantly manipulates the town's social and political currents to his advantage. Swearingen's background, much like the real-life man he is based on, is clouded in mystery and shadowy dealings. Historically, Al Swearingen, born Ellis Albert Swearingen in 1845, did indeed operate the original Gem Theater, a combination saloon and brothel that became one of the most profitable and notorious establishments in Deadwood. It attracted gold miners, gamblers, and drifters from across the West, and Swearingen built his fortune by providing entertainment, drink, and companionship in a chaotic mining camp that lacked formal law and order. The show also humanizes him by depicting his struggles with kidney stones, a recurring health issue that underscores his vulnerability and humanity amid the ruthless world he inhabits. Despite rarely venturing beyond the walls of his establishment, Swearingen is portrayed as a pivotal force behind the town's direction, influencing business deals, brokering alliances, and shaping outcomes from behind the scenes. For many viewers, this layered portrayal is precisely what makes the character so compelling. He is at once a symbol of the unrestrained ambition and entrepreneurial spirit that built towns like Deadwood, and a reminder of how power in the Old West often rested in the hands of those who could outthink and outmaneuver their rivals. It's this intricate balance of charisma, intelligence, and authority that has made Al Swearingen one of the most memorable and beloved characters in modern Western storytelling. In real life, Swearingen was a very different man from the sharp-tongued, worldly character portrayed on television. Born in 1845 in Oskaloosa, Iowa, he was the son of Dutch-American farmers and spent much of his early life far removed from the rough-and-tumble frontier. He lived in Iowa well into adulthood before deciding to head west during the height of the Black Hills Gold Rush. In 1876, he arrived in the lawless settlement of Deadwood with his wife, Nettie. Their marriage, however, soon ended in divorce, the first of 3 failed unions in his lifetime, hinting at a personal life as tumultuous as the world he operated in. Swearingen's first business venture in Deadwood was a modest establishment known as the Cricket, a saloon built from canvas and rough lumber to serve the flood of miners pouring into the booming camp. But ambition pushed him to think bigger. He soon replaced the Cricket with the Gem Theater, a much grander operation that combined a saloon, dance hall, gambling room, and entertainment venue. The Gem quickly became the social heart of Deadwood and one of the most profitable businesses in the Black Hills, reportedly generating between $5,000 and $10,000 a night, equivalent to hundreds of thousands of dollars today. While Swearingen was a shrewd and influential businessman, his operations were far from respectable. Like many saloon owners of the era, he was deeply involved in the exploitation of vulnerable women. Historical accounts indicate that he frequently recruited women to Deadwood under false pretenses, promising them work or opportunities, only for them to find themselves coerced into the town's underground economy once they arrived. This darker side of his enterprise underscores the harsh realities of frontier life, where lawlessness and desperation often shape the fates of those seeking a fresh start. Swearingen was also an expert in building alliances and navigating Deadwood's informal power structures. He formed relationships with influential miners, merchants, and even lawmen, using strategic partnerships and financial incentives to protect his interests and expand his influence. In this sense, he embodied the entrepreneurial and often morally ambiguous spirit that defined many frontier power brokers. The historical Swearingen also diverges sharply from his fictional counterpart in other ways. He was not British, nor did he possess the theatrical flair seen on screen. And while the HBO version ends with his quiet passing inside the gem, reality tells a murkier story. The gem itself was destroyed by fire in 1879, rebuilt and destroyed again in 1899, a testament to both Deadwood's volatility and Swearingen's determination. After the second fire, he left town and faded into obscurity. His final chapter remains one of Deadwood's enduring mysteries. In 1904, Swearingen's life ended under suspicious circumstances near Denver, Colorado. Although the details remain unclear, historians believe his death was likely the result of foul play, a fittingly enigmatic conclusion to the life of one of the Old West's most infamous and misunderstood figures. Seth Bullock. In the show, Seth Bullock stands as Al Swearingen's moral counterweight, a man guided by a steadfast belief in law, justice, and order amid the chaos of frontier life. He is portrayed as principled and determined, a figure who strives to do what's right even when the world around him refuses to follow the same code. Yet despite his best intentions, Bullock is not without flaws. He is often driven by a passionate temperament, and this intensity can lead him into conflict, both with others and within himself. Although he is highly capable with a firearm, the series makes a point of showing that Bullock relies on his judgment and authority rather than force. His restraint reflects a deeper truth about frontier lawmen. Success was often measured not by how quickly they could draw a weapon, but by how effectively they could impose order without resorting to it. In this way, Bullock serves as one of the show's primary moral anchors, along with his close friend and business partner, Sol Starr, offering a sense of balance to the more ruthless elements of Deadwood society. Bullock's story is also deeply tied to the evolving identity of the town itself. He and Starr open a hardware business that quickly flourishes, symbolizing the slow transformation of Deadwood from a rough mining camp into a permanent settlement. His personal life is marked by loyalty and responsibility. After the death of his brother, he marries his widowed sister-in-law and embraces the role of husband and father. The tragedy of losing their young son to an accident underscores the personal sacrifices and sorrows that shaped many pioneer families on the frontier. As Deadwood grows, so too does Bullock's role in its future. Eventually, he is appointed as the town's sheriff, a position that embodies both his character and his purpose. His tenure is defined by discipline, resolve, and a relentless commitment to justice, qualities that he carries well beyond the events depicted in the series. In real life, much of Seth Bullock's early story in Deadwood aligns closely with historical fact. His arrival in the gold rush town in 1876 happened almost exactly as portrayed on screen, including an incident in Helena, Montana, involving an angry crowd and a horse thief, though the real-life version unfolded with some notable differences. Once in Deadwood, Bullock's life intersected with that of Al Swearingen on several occasions, though their encounters were less theatrical and more grounded in the day-to-day realities of establishing order in a rough frontier settlement. Before his move to the Dakota Territory, Bullock had already built a distinguished reputation in Montana. He served as the sheriff of Lewis and Clark County, based in Helena, after being elected in 1873, and he played a key role in early efforts to establish Yellowstone National Park, demonstrating a lifelong dedication to public service and the preservation of natural resources. His leadership and sense of civic duty became defining traits that would follow him to Deadwood and beyond. Upon settling in Deadwood, Bullock partnered with his longtime friend Sol Starr to open a hardware business, mirroring the show's depiction. However, this was just the first chapter of his entrepreneurial life. Bullock eventually transitioned into the hospitality industry, founding the Bullock Hotel, which became the largest and most prestigious hotel in Deadwood, a landmark that still stands today as a testament to his business acumen and influence. His law enforcement career in Deadwood was more limited than the series suggests. Bullock served as sheriff for about 18 months, beginning in 1877, but lost the office in subsequent elections. His role as a lawman would resurface decades later when President Theodore Roosevelt, a close personal friend whom Bullock first met in 1884, appointed him as a U.S. Marshal in 1905. Their friendship, rooted in shared ideals of duty, courage, and frontier spirit, lasted for the rest of their lives and became one of the most significant relationships of Bullock's career. The television version of his personal life also takes considerable creative liberties. Contrary to the storyline, Bullock never married his brother's widow. His actual wife, Martha Bullock, and their daughter Margaret joined him in Deadwood only after he had established himself there. The family preferred a quieter life on a ranch outside of town, rather than living in the bustling and often chaotic mining settlement. Seth Bullock passed away from cancer in 1919, having spent more than 4 decades shaping the character and future of Deadwood. He was laid to rest in Mount Moriah Cemetery, overlooking the town he helped transform from a lawless mining camp into a permanent community. In reality, Bullock's legacy is defined not only by his time as sheriff, but also by his lasting contributions as a businessman, conservation advocate, and federal lawman. Calamity Jane. Calamity Jane Canary makes her entrance in Deadwood alongside Wild Bill Hickok and Charlie Utter in the very first episode, and from that moment on, she becomes one of the most memorable recurring figures in the series. The show portrays her as a rough-edged, hard-drinking woman whose unrefined manner often masks a deeply loyal and compassionate spirit. Beneath the slurred speech and chaotic behavior lies someone driven by fierce devotion to those she cares about, and a strong, if unconventional, moral code. One of the most important relationships in Jane's story is her connection with Hickok. The series emphasizes how deeply she admired and respected him, almost to the point of reverence. His death leaves her emotionally shattered, and this event becomes one of the most defining moments of her character arc. Through her grief, the show explores the vulnerability beneath her tough exterior, showing that her bravado often hides real pain and longing. The show's portrayal of Jane also reflects broader truths about frontier women in the American West. Many, like her, lived outside conventional social norms, carving out space for themselves in a world that offered few opportunities for independence. In real life, the story of Martha Jane Canary, better known to history as Calamity Jane, is shrouded in myth, legend, and contradiction. Even basic details about her early years are debated by historians. Some accounts describe her as a scout or guide for U.S. Army expeditions, possibly even serving under General George Custer, while others claim she was more likely employed in support roles such as cooking or camp maintenance. The origins of her famous nickname, Calamity Jane, are just as uncertain. Numerous stories attempt to explain it, from daring acts in dangerous situations to dramatic incidents on the frontier. But none can be confirmed with certainty. What is known is that Canary was born Martha Jane Canary in Missouri in 1852 and became known for defying 19th century gender norms. She was often seen wearing men's clothing, carrying firearms, and traveling with groups of scouts and frontiersmen, behaviors that challenged social expectations of women at the time. By 1875, she had made her way to the Black Hills region, arriving in Deadwood via Rapid City. There she became associated with Dora DeFran, one of the most influential madams in the area. This relationship likely inspired her fictional connection with Joni Stubbs in the HBO series. Canary and Wild Bill Hickok were indeed acquainted, but the true nature of their relationship remains unclear. Some sources suggest she deeply admired him, while others indicate he may not have shared those feelings. Unlike the more modest and reserved version of Jane portrayed on screen, historical evidence suggests she occasionally worked in the sex trade and was known to be one of the first performers at Swearingen's Gem Theater, where she reportedly even recruited other women to work there. These details highlight a far more complex and pragmatic woman than the fictionalized version audiences see. Her well-documented struggles with alcohol were another defining feature of her life. Jane's heavy drinking and frequent blackouts were widely known even during her lifetime, contributing both to her reputation as a notorious figure and to the many legends that grew around her name. Despite her challenges, she continued to reinvent herself. In her later years, she performed in Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show and made public appearances at events such as the 1901 Pan American Exposition, presenting herself as a living symbol of the Old West era. In 1903, much like her portrayal in the Deadwood film, Jane returned to the Black Hills and briefly worked as a cook for Dora Dufran. That summer, while traveling by train to Terry, South Dakota, her health deteriorated after heavy drinking. She was taken to a nearby hotel, where she passed away shortly thereafter. Calamity Jane was laid to rest in Mount Moriah Cemetery, fittingly next to Wild Bill Hickok, a final gesture that immortalized their legendary connection. While the HBO series captures certain truths, her unconventional lifestyle, her defiance of social norms, and her deep-seated struggles, it also amplifies and simplifies aspects of her personality. The real Calamity Jane was more than a caricature of rough language and hard living. She was a fiercely independent woman who carved out her own path in a man's world, a figure both flawed and formidable, whose life story continues to fascinate historians and storytellers alike. E.B. Farnum. In the show, E.B. Farnum is one of Deadwood's most eccentric and peculiar characters, a man whose behavior constantly oscillates between nervous energy and comical self-importance. He operates the town's primary hotel, which, despite its prominence, is portrayed as shabby, poorly maintained, and offering less than appealing food and accommodations. Farnum himself is often disheveled, speaking in long, rambling sentences and frequently muttering to himself, as if engaged in endless internal debates. The show leans into his awkwardness and social ineptitude, presenting him as a man desperate for validation, but perpetually out of his depth. His tendency to overcompensate for his insecurities often makes him the target of ridicule, yet he always manages to survive the shifting political landscape of Deadwood. In many ways, Farnum is the embodiment of opportunism on the frontier. Insignificant in stature, yet persistent and surprisingly resilient. Farnum's role as a longtime resident of Deadwood places him squarely in the orbit of Al Swearingen, and he often acts as a loyal subordinate or errand runner. However, beneath this veneer of servitude lies a more cunning side. He is deceitful and calculating when it suits him, capable of manipulating situations to his advantage despite his apparent incompetence. His ambitions are small but constant: power, recognition, and a seat at the table, even if that seat is more ceremonial than substantial. One of the most telling aspects of his portrayal is his appointment as the town's mayor. The position is largely symbolic and intended to serve the interests of more powerful figures like Swearingen, but Farnum embraces it wholeheartedly. In real life, Ethan Bennett. Farnum was, in fact, one of Deadwood's earliest settlers and holds the distinction of being the town's first official mayor. However, the real man bore little resemblance to the eccentric, bumbling character portrayed in the series. Rather than running a hotel, Farnum owned and operated a general store, which served as a vital hub for miners and settlers in the bustling Gold Rush community. Far from being a lonely bachelor as depicted on screen, Farnum arrived in Deadwood with his wife, Mary Farnum, and together they raised 3 children while living in the Dakota Territory. Before venturing west, he had already built a respectable career as the postmaster in Springfield, Wisconsin, demonstrating a level of civic involvement and responsibility that would later shape his role in Deadwood's early development. Upon his arrival in 1876, the same year he was elected mayor, Farnham quickly established himself as a prominent figure in the young settlement. Beyond running his store, he expanded his business interests, acquiring property throughout the area and investing in mining operations, which were the backbone of Deadwood's rapidly growing economy. He also participated in a number of civic initiatives aimed at improving the town's infrastructure, helping to transform Deadwood from a rough mining town to a thriving community camp into a functioning community. By the 1880s, Farnham's chapter in Deadwood came to a close when he and his family relocated to Chicago, a move likely motivated by new business prospects or changing economic conditions in the Black Hills. Records later place him in Maury County, Tennessee, according to the 1900 U.S. Census, though the exact date and circumstances of his death remain unknown, a historical mystery that has yet to be solved. While the fictional version provides comic relief and memorable dialogue, the historical Farnham appears to have been a far more conventional and respected figure, a family man, entrepreneur, investor, and civic leader who played an important role in shaping Deadwood's foundation. Wild Bill Hickok. In the show, James Butler. Wild Bill Hickok, one of the most iconic figures of the American frontier, appears in only a handful of episodes in Deadwood, reflecting the historical reality of his brief time in the town. Actor Keith Carradine portrays him as a man whose legendary status has become both a source of pride and a heavy burden. Once celebrated as a lawman and gunfighter, Hickok in the series is shown as weary and reflective, a figure struggling to reconcile his past with a future that feels increasingly uncertain. The show paints a portrait of Hickok in his later years, grappling with declining health and a dependence on alcohol that clouds his judgment and heightens his melancholy. Despite his fame, he often seems disillusioned, aware that the myth surrounding his name has grown larger than the man himself. The only moments of genuine peace for him come at the poker table, where he finds a measure of calm amid the chaos of Deadwood's lawless streets. His departure from the series mirrors his real-life fate. During a card game at Nuttall and Mann's number 10 Saloon, Hickok is shot from behind by Jack McCall, a disgruntled gambler whose actions would cement Hickok's death as one of the most infamous events of the Old West. The show depicts McCall initially escaping local justice due to a flawed trial process in Deadwood, a detail true to history, only to be later apprehended by Seth Bullock and Hickok's close friend, Charlie Utter, who ensure he is delivered to territorial authorities in Yankton for proper legal proceedings. In real life, James Butler. Wild Bill Hickok met his end in Deadwood on August 1st, 1876, during a poker game at Nuttall and Mann's Saloon number 10, and a slightly different name from the one portrayed in the series. The show captures the essential details of the event accurately. Historical records confirm that an argument had occurred earlier in the day following a particularly disastrous poker hand, which deeply humiliated Jack McCall, the man responsible for Hickok's death. McCall's first trial in Deadwood reflected the chaotic nature of justice in frontier towns. With no formal legal system in place, a hastily assembled local jury was convened, and McCall claimed, without credible evidence, that he had acted to avenge his brother, who he alleged had been killed by Hickok years earlier in Abilene, Kansas. The claim was never substantiated, and it is widely believed to have been fabricated to sway public opinion. Despite the flimsy defense, McCall was acquitted in Deadwood, a decision that many historians attribute to the absence of established territorial law and the improvised nature of early frontier courts. However, McCall's reprieve was temporary. Federal authorities later arrested him, not by Seth Bullock and Charlie Utter, as the show suggests, but by U.S. Marshals, and he was transported to Yankton, the capital of Dakota Territory, for a proper trial under U.S. jurisdiction. This time, the court found him guilty and justice was carried out in accordance with territorial law. The series portrays the final chapter of Hickok's life with a high degree of historical accuracy. The only notable liberties taken are in the portrayal of his relationship with Seth Bullock and minor details of his attire. In reality, Bullock arrived in Deadwood just one day before Hickok's death, making it almost certain that the two never met. Additionally, Hickok was known to carry his trademark pair of Colt 1851 Navy revolvers in traditional holsters, rather than tucked into a sash as depicted on screen. Even today, Hickok's name stands as one of the most enduring symbols of the Old West, a complex figure whose life embodied both the glamour and the grim reality of the American frontier. The Deadwood we see on screen is a gritty, unforgettable vision of the American frontier. But as you've just discovered, much of that story is built on creative liberties, exaggerations, and outright inventions. The real town was every bit as fascinating, but also more complicated, more human, and far less glamorous than HBO's version. Behind every character and every plotline is a truth often stranger and darker than fiction.
Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.